Welcome back to Down to Earth. Caleb and I are really excited to have you guys join us today, and we're really excited to be here with Uncle Marty, who's going to share some more stories with us today.
Well, it's a real pleasure to be with you and to be able to share these stories.
Yeah, we're excited to be journeying along with you and learning more about discipleship and what that looks like in our world today.
I know you have two stories that you just heard recently from one of your leaders, I guess, from
Yes, well, we
your
can't
group.
share with the public. This is the person of the story that we'll be talking about today.
Oh, wow.
And it took place here not too long ago. Someone from the interior of the country called a distant relative. We have a daughter who needs to take her board examinations in the capital city. Would you mind her staying in our home? And he says, please send them. So the daughter comes there, and she stays in the room with two teenage daughters. And before long, they get into a big discussion. And they're saying, we're followers of Jesus, and the Bible is not corrupted. And she's saying, the Bible's corrupted, and you need to be true Muslims. You're not real Muslims. How are you doing? Your dad's the big tribal chief. And they get into this big argument. So these two younger teenage daughters are fighting with this older lady who is taking her board examinations. And actually, my friend here, his ministry leader that I showed you his photo, he was out traveling. And the next day, his wife comes and says, honey, there's a little problem. Our two daughters are very zealous. Maybe you should talk with them. And so the next day, he calls his two daughters in. I need to talk with you. And they're wondering, what's going on there? Are we in trouble or what? Why has Dad called us in to talk with us? And he says, is there anything you want to share with me? No, nothing. I don't know anything, Dad.
That's a very typical dad thing. Hey, tell me about your life. Is there anything you want to share with me?
It's
Well, he
always
says-
made me nervous.
I always felt like I did something wrong. I'm like,
And
no?
so he says, let's just have a prayer first. So they have a prayer, and he says, tell me about what's going on with, we will call her name Zuleha. And they says, oh, we've been trying to share about Jesus and the Bible with her. And he says, how have you gone about doing that? Well, we've been arguing, and she doesn't want to listen. And he says, tell me more. Well, it's actually so bad now that we can hardly talk with each other. She's gotten angry with us, and we've gotten angry with her. And he says, I admire you wanting to share Jesus, but maybe this isn't the way to share Jesus with these tactics. And they kind of thought, well, we hadn't thought about that, Dad. We're really sorry, but you're right. We've been maybe overly aggressive. And he says, when she comes back today, why don't you not even bring up the subject and just be quiet about it? The best example we could be now is just show what does it mean to be a follower of Jesus. And why don't we just propose as a family for the next couple days while she's still in our home just to fast and pray for her. We don't need to tell her we're doing a thing, go about life's business, don't do any more arguing, and let's just see what God will do. You've already planted seeds and she's not open, and no need to keep pounding her with it. And the two girls look down, we think you're right, Daddy, sorry. We might have even put our family in a security problem due to what we have done.
Yeah.
He says, well, I'm not so concerned about that. Well, that is true. I'm more concerned that this isn't really the way as I see Jesus being. He wants us to be an example, but to pound people like this, it's counterproductive. So the two daughters says, yes, Daddy, we will fast and pray. So the two daughters start fasting and praying. Zuleha leaves. Within a few days, something incredible happens. She actually has what she describes as a vision. She's about to lay down to sleep. She's not fully asleep. And all of a sudden, this bright, shining figure comes before her. And he has this powerful voice, and he says, who is he who was dead and yet is alive? And she answers, it is Jesus the Christ. And then the voice says again, who is he who raised the dead to life? And she answers, it is Jesus the Christ. Who is he who everyone is waiting for his soon return? And she answers, it is Jesus the Christ. Who is he who knows the future? And she answers, it is Jesus Christ.
You're giving me goosebumps.
And then she comes out of the vision, and she doesn't know what to make of it, and passes a few days, and she has the same vision again.
Oh, wow.
And she first thought maybe she was just seeing things, but now at the end of the second vision, she's now a little bit embarrassed to go back to the house because she had gotten so angry about these issues herself, and the daughters had fought so much, it was almost convenient when she had to leave for both of them. So she now goes back to, we will call him Ali. Ali goes back, he's from the Middle East, North Africa region. She goes to his sister. She says, you know, I've had these two visions, and I know that you're also a follower of Jesus. What should I do? She says, well, you need to go back and talk with his wife, with his children, put things right. You kind of ended on a wrong tone with them. And then ask, because I know that my brother really understands visions and dreams well. Why don't you go share the vision and dream with them? So she comes back and talks with the daughters and says, I was maybe a little harsh. And they says, no, we're so sorry. That's not the way a follower of Jesus acts. We shouldn't have forced him on you, and that was wrong of us. And we're so sorry. And then she asked the wife, I have something to share with your husband. Would you mind if I speak with him? And so she then shares her two visions. And she says, what should I do? And she says, I forgot the end of the two dreams. It says, you need to read the Bible and follow Jesus. And he says, well, that's the answer to your dream. And he says, we would like to invite you to also be followers of Jesus like our family. And so right then that week, she accepted Jesus as her Lord and Savior. And now today, she's become a part of their core team as they travel around the country to share Jesus. In this country, they have distributed almost 100,000 Bibles within their tribe. We desperately need another about 45,000 Bibles. And they're just saying, please help us. This is a closed country. It's not cheap to get Bibles to this country, but they're saying, please help us. And Zuleika says, please, I want the Bible now to go to everyone. And people listen to her. She's a very articulate young lady. And besides now being a professional, she is really putting most of her time into traveling across their tribe, working with the women, teaching them how to read the Bible, and just really encouraging others to become followers of Jesus like herself.
Oh, that's amazing. Whew. Okay, story number 2, because right now I've still got the goosebumps running up and down my arms.
The second story also with Ali, and this just happened very recently. Besides being a ministry leader, his main job is being a tribal judge, a tribal chief, and not just for his own tribe, but also on a national level. He was elected to be the chief arbitrator. And there were two clans fighting each other in their country. Traditionally, after the government has said to calm down and stop fighting each other, you're now getting others and civilians mixed up and children mixed up and people outside your own community mixed up. The official army will come and just squelch it. And he says, look, let me go talk to them first. And so he comes there. It's a unique situation. He's not quite sure what to do. He asks them what happened. And so it turned out that one clan had run out of water. So they left one village and they knew another village had water and also had enough pasture for their animals. And they came up and just kind of forced themselves on the other village. They first asked, but they didn't ask probably well enough. And the other village was angry and didn't share with them. So he now says, how do I resolve this very tenuous, difficult problem? He just starts praying, Jesus, I have no idea how to resolve this. Many people have been killed. They're waging actual warfare, like guerrilla warfare against each other. The deaths are piling up. Now there's been women and children caught in the crossfire. One village trying to keep their territory, another one trying to invade it. So he calls a ceasefire. They agree to a small ceasefire. So now he talks first to the main village. He asks them, why are you in this war? Well, we don't want them to take over our village. Well, I can understand that, but did you offer them water? They needed water. You know that they're your relatives. I mean, distance. It's not a completely different clan. Why didn't you embrace them? Well, they put their head down. How much water is in your town? And he said, is there enough water for you? And they said, yes. Is there enough water for the others? Yes. Well, why didn't you share your water? And they all kind of hung their heads. Because he's now like a big, powerful chief, representing not just himself, but the government and the whole nation. He says, well, would you be willing to share with them? Well, but they have already killed so many of our men, and so many of our women have been killed, and even a few children have been killed in the crossfire. He says, well, if we could work something, would you be willing to share your water? Well, maybe. So on the other side, he goes and speaks to the others, and he asks them, did you ask politely for water? And they all again kind of hang their heads. And would you be willing to apologize? We don't think we could apologize. They killed already too many of our people. And so, oh man, what do I do? How do I resolve this? And he finally brought several of the leaders together. And he says, let me ask you, do you want your children to be dying over this and your wives to be dying? They say, we really don't. Why don't we just put things right between us? Would you be willing to pay for the water and the land you're using? For sure we would be willing to pay. Why didn't you offer in the beginning? Oh, we don't know. Are you willing to tell them sorry? Well, finally one of the elders says, we're sorry. And the other group finally says, okay, we will be willing to share. And after working with them for about a week there, Ali was able to bring peace, reconciliation. When he left, they had made room in their houses, made places where they could put themselves and they could use their water. And from a human standpoint, when he arrived, it seemed totally impossible. Jesus came in, helped resolve. And today, many of those people in those villages want to know, who is this God that Ali serves that brought peace and reconciliation when we saw no way forward among ourselves?
Oh. To me, this story strikes very close to home, only because I grew up in a town that had something similar happen. I grew up in a town where for the last 100 years plus, they've been fighting because one group from the same tribe came to this town as refugees. And on and off through my entire childhood, there was fighting back and forth. And it was always over little things. Somebody drew the property lines wrong and would put the head chief in the wrong sector. And it was just so sad watching that as I grew up, these people from the same tribe who would just slaughter each other. Having somebody like Ali come and show Jesus and just bring Jesus into that situation could have saved so many lives and made such a huge difference.
Well, it's true. I think that many times we just want to leave Jesus in church, but we don't take Jesus to the street, to the very dirty, ugly streets that we live in. And if we let him come in and permeate and change, and we see these massive social dynamics start to change and people stand up. How can I bring Jesus into my everyday life? It's my job to go visit these people. I could have just told the army, come and force these people into submission, and we're going to charge them all their costs. Because, you know, this is how you do war. The winning side imposes suffrage and the cost. So typically speaking in this country, he could have come in, they don't want to listen. We'll bring in the army, we'll force submission, and then we're going to charge them all the cost it cost us to bring the army out here. And so this is what Ali would have normally been expected to do. But he says, how can I bring Christ in here? How can I do this different? They're already so poor and devastated. To bring in the army, yeah, we can force them down, and then we can exact money from both of these tribes that have been fighting. But will that really bring long, enduring peace?
It just brings the great controversy home for me, and just thinking about verses about how the devil just come to steal and kill and destroy, just stirring people up after they got together and thought about it. They're like, this really isn't what we were wanting for our families or anything. And it's just incredible what a little bit of Jesus and doing things his way goes a long ways and just makes things right if we're willing to go down that path with him.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we're talking about discipleship, and last episode you'd shared with us kind of 8 facets of discipleship. I was wondering if we could go just kind of briefly touch on those again and review some of that stuff, and then you could help us kind of walk into the next facet that we were going to look at today.
Yes, so as we mentioned last time, we see discipleship as this foundation, and then there's 8 areas, really, as I have looked across the ministries that we work with, that it really just comes in and permeates. And this is the family and yourself, your larger extended community, civil society. How does it affect the legal and judiciary system and the injustices found therein? How does it affect the economy? How does it affect the taxation system? And how do you deal with unfair taxes? How do you deal with the military and injustices of an occupying military in your area? How do you deal with a corrupt government? How do you deal finally with religious issues? And usually we see Jesus only dealing with religious issues. But as I've worked with people in these countries, we see that they're finding that Jesus is speaking into all of these areas of life.
Pretty much every aspect.
Pretty much every aspect. And something is kind of related to the stories that we shared today. I wanted to share about what does Jesus say to these. And we remember the verse that says, do not resist evil, or the evil person. Turn the other cheek. If they ask you for a tunic, give him also your inner garment. And finally, it says, if you're asked to walk 1 mile, walk the 2nd mile. So now I want to just quickly look on these issues. And these went to the very core of what angered Jews at this time. And I want to show you from a first century model, what did they hear? What was Jesus saying at this time? So, first of all, Jesus says, if someone slaps you, turn the other cheek. And so what did that mean in their time? So we have to understand, how did this play out? In the first century, Judea is under occupation. They used to be private landlords. They're no longer small private landlords, but now they're big, massive landlords, people who own massive lands, many of them absentee landlords. They have stewards who are overseeing their land, and you keep everyone in place by physical violence. The way they usually do this, to understand, they don't use left hands unless you're boxing. Everything is done with your right hand. And you keep servants, slaves in check by backhanded slaps, like this. And you never do it with a front slap. You only do with someone equal. So if 2 sons of landlords or even 2 peasant kids fight or 2 adults fight, you fought fist, but you would never touch another person with your left hand. And if you were equals, you would give a front slap, but never a back slap. Roman law in Judea said that if 2 men were being unruly, brought problems, you could fine up to 30 days' income, meaning 30 denarius. If you back slapped an equal, it was 360 denarius fine. So now we put this into context of what Jesus says. He says if someone strikes you, this means it's commonplace. It was common to strike a slave or a peasant. So Jesus says, if someone strikes you, turn the other cheek. If someone strikes your right cheek, you turn it like this. So now what does it do? He has just strapped you like this, and now you need to come back. And you have just challenged him in a non-violent way to the person who is bringing violence on you in an unjust way. Usually, when you have peasants, you line everyone up to see the punishment. So now everyone's watching. You've just backslapped him and you go like this, but now he's put his other cheek out. And now this is a non-violent way of confronting evil.
And the only way to hit that other cheek is to come back full front.
To come back. And so now all of a sudden, whoever's going to hit you, he has to double think. It might mean you will go and get a beating with a rod, but you have just confronted him and said, I am your equal. And he will probably bring down his hand. Because if he hits you, now he's saying, you are my equal. And if he does hit you, all the other slaves will start to laugh. So to really understand this, when Jesus says there in Matthew, do not resist evil, the word there for resist, a better translation, it means war. You don't war against the person. But he then tells you how to do it. Then he says the second one. He says, if you have been taken to court and they ask for your outer garment, they have been downgraded from freeholding landowners to being peasants. Now, what did the big landlords do? They gave you at a 20 to 25% interest rate seed. So besides planning for him, the seed they gave you for your own little lot was at 20 to 25%. So if you lost your seed, you had a bad harvest on your seed, now he could take your outer cloak because he owns your land, he owns the little house that you live in, he owns everything. So all you own really is your own clothing. So now if you can't pay him back, he will take your outer coat. Now the Old Testament put regulations. If you take your coat, you have to give it back at night. And so just like you will see Ali's clothing here, they have an inner garment, and many times when it's cold, they have an outer garment. So he's wearing here a white tunic. So this was typical of probably what was worn at Jesus' time as well. similar type clothing, and then you have an outer tunic that you hold. So Jesus says, if they take your outer tunic, take off your inner garment and give it to the person who has just brought you to court. Now we say, why do you do this? Well, according to Mediterranean tradition, nakedness, if you're forced into naked, it's not an embarrassment for the person who is naked, but the embarrassment is for everyone around you. So now Jesus turns the legal system upside down. They're coming unjustly because already under Herod and under Roman occupation, you have lost your land. You've been forced into a situation where you're being charged 20 to 25% on your seeds. You don't even own the home you live in if you're in a rural setting. So now what does Jesus say? They've brought you to court, take off and walk out naked, and you still have your loincloth on underneath. And now you start walking down, and soon you'll have a throng behind you. It's a passive revolution, saying enough is enough. You're going to take my coat, take this. So now the guy's really embarrassed because he has now been shamed. Everyone sees that he is so corrupt, he's now made you naked. And now he's running behind you trying to give you your clothing. This is how dynamics would have played out. Jesus says, if they force you to walk 1 mile, walk a 2nd mile. And this was something also very prevalent. In Galilee and Judea where he's preaching, it's the crossroads, a mega highway that crosses. It was called the Maris Appia. It was like the highway. Major crisscross of trade right in front of Capernaum. Major crossroad of military operations. If someone saw the military coming, they would shout and everyone would hide in the field so they wouldn't have to be forced to labor. But the early followers of Jesus were taught, don't hide. Put your shoulders back. Walk with your head straight. Come up to the soldiers when they ask you, and you carry his pack. Now, peasants weren't supposed to make eye contact with a superior or with military people. You were always supposed to look down, hunch down, and now you come out as a follower of Jesus, shoulders up, look him in the eye. How may I help you, sir? Carry my pack. As you start to carry your pack, because of your demeanor now, they start to wonder, am I forcing a landlord to carry? He's acting more like a landlord than a peasant. He hasn't cursed me. All the peasants we ever know, they're muttering. We even have to bring out the whips to force them to carry. But one thing of Roman law, even though they had many abuses, abuse could only go so far. They didn't want to have a peasant uprising, so it said they had along the roads mile markers, and you couldn't force them beyond 1 mile. Then you could take other peasants, but you couldn't force them. Now you come to the end of the 1 mile, and you hold onto the pack and say, I will carry it another mile. Now, the soldiers, they've probably already been talking, and they want to know who he is. Are you the landlord? Who are you? Why do you want to carry it another mile? Now the soldier's scared because there was very severe penalties if you forced someone to carry it a 2nd mile. The worst is you could be beaten. You could be made to sleep outside the camp for 1 week. You could have a ration of barley instead of wheat for a week. Or you could stand in your underwear in front of the centurion's tent all day. So you didn't know what it was, but these were the laws for someone to walk more than a mile. And now you're saying, no, I'm going to walk. So the soldier is wondering, who is this person? Is he wanting to get me in trouble? And I will be in trouble if I let him, and then he acts nice. What's happening? So usually what would happen, they'd say, no, I'm not trying to get you in trouble. And the soldier would say, okay, I will carry it another mile. But come with me and tell me who you are. And then he starts to share about Jesus. I am a disciple. And remember, this word disciple is like a university student. You're a university student? No, I'm a common laborer. But I have become transformed by Jesus. Within 100 years, 1/3 of the Roman army has become followers of Jesus. Big persecutions break out against the follower of Jesus, not because of their doctrine, because of the social impact. No longer can the empire send their soldiers on rampage, because much of their payment would be by rampage and theft, as they did invasions, because now you have 1/3 of the army refusing to do this.
Wow.
Jesus comes in and he gives ways to turn things around.
That's really revolutionary. I mean, I'd always heard that Jesus' teachings were really radical, but then to put them in first century context and understand them in the cultural aspect and what you're telling other people as you're politely rebelling, I guess, against the social structure.
It's like I don't agree, but I'm not going to bear arms, as it were, but I'm going to be a conscientious objector.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely not like the easy way out or a wimpy way out by any means, as it's most often painted. I think it's definitely misunderstood.
Absolutely.
Wow, so learning to be able to do things through nonviolence, huh?
Well, this is what we've found is how do you deal with evil without running away, without flight, or without fight? And you find this third way of Jesus. And this is what I've seen, that something that the Muslim world desperately needs. And when they find that Jesus gives answers to this, they say, I want to be a part of this.
I think it's a lesson that all of us could apply. So maybe we can end our session today with a word of prayer. And something you said earlier in the episode has kind of stuck with me. You mentioned that Ali's and Zuleha's group still needs 40,000 Bibles, correct?
Correct.
So why don't we both pray that God will show us in our lives how to come up with ways to deal with our conflict resolution situations in a nonviolent way, and also for those Bibles that God will send them.
Amen.
Let's pray. Great God in heaven, we just come before you today asking for your presence in each of our lives to show us how we can deal with the situations that we come in contact with in a nonviolent way that glorifies you. Lord, I also ask today that you show Ali and Zuleha how the best way is that you can help to get them these 40,000 Bibles, God. Getting them in this country is not going to be easy, Lord, but we know that with you all things are possible. In Jesus' name, amen. And we'll look forward to seeing you guys next week here at Down to Earth.